Introduction. Today I'm going to talk about my ongoing art practice-led visual documentation on the place where I've lived for many years, Canberra, the federal capital of Australia. In my biased view, Canberra is a unique urban green environment unlike any other Australian capital city, and is the only city that originated from a competition. Canberra is a young city that in the span of one person's life has gone from a 1950s population of 20,000 to 480,000 in 2024. My talk originates from two contrasting photo books that illustrate different visual elements of Canberra's historical and current urban environments. These two contrasting photo book examples show how traditional green landscape design has been sacrificed for urban density in recent Canberra urban development. This sacrifice of landscape design for urban density has health and climate change consequences. The two photo books I will talk about are Urban Green Fractal Aesthetics and Urban Citadel. Urban Green Fractal Aesthetics features the 1920s design era inner suburb of Reed, urban forestry environment, and incorporated the social reform ideals of the garden city into its residential suburban design. I argue this urban design has positive residential health and climate change benefits. Urban Citadel features images of the current ongoing residential high-rise redevelopment of Woden Town Centre in southern Canberra, and is an example of infill strategy at work with little regard for urban forestry. I suggest this lack has negative health and climate change benefits. These photo books are part of an urban studies project intended to provide a basic building block from which future studies on Canberra can be built upon, and to date comprise 9 photo books and 1 video. Each work features a unique aspect of Canberra's historical and current urban environment depicted through subjective images. Taken as a whole or as a part, I contend this project can provide a unique information of urban Canberra. Media and its limitations. Written media's limitations are frequently acknowledged. Thrift's non-representational theory places emphasis on everyday practices that cannot be adequately described. Thrift argued that written text can only inadequately communicate multi-sensual practices and experiences. Thrift used the example of dance performance and suggested that no matter how carefully written media is used, this multi-sensory practice cannot be adequately captured or analysed. The point here is this limitation is not even acknowledged, which is misleading to the reader. The urban is experienced as a multi-sensual aesthetic environment. I acknowledge these photo books only deal in one sense, the still image. These images depict my aesthetic point of view, which is also a limitation, as they may not how you see these environments. Nevertheless, I will argue how we experience a multi-sensual aesthetic environment is personal anyway, and therefore is always biased. However, in these environments we also have other aesthetic elements like sound and movement that add to the holistic experience that I cannot capture in the still image. By acknowledging this still image medium limitations, I am also acknowledging the sensorial experiences that cannot be discussed. For example, the still images do not transmit sound, so the viewer cannot judge noise pollution or its lack. Urban Green Fractal Aesthetics. This book features photographs of the 1920s residential heritage suburb of Reed in inner city Canberra, and explores the aesthetic role vegetation plays in Reed's public areas. The photographs were taken during Canberra's 2023-24 summer, when Reed's suburban vegetation was at its densest. Reed was named along garden city principles that included the presence of central landscape reserves overlooked by housing, broad verges and generous blocks with hedges. As a byproduct, the photographs show these heritage 1920s era streets and public areas populated by non-native plants. Although the government and locals acknowledged the traditional owners of the area, the Reed suburban area would not look out of place in a European city. Beyond this acknowledgement, the indigenous landscape has been overridden by European suburban development, and the memory associations are now Canberra suburban. This raises questions of future research on the nature of this heritage. Phonologically, I found walking around Reed in the 2023 Canberra summer relaxing. Why? In the 1980s, Ulrich et al. Carried out studies exposing subjects of pictures of nature versus pictures of an urban environment. The results showed that the images of nature significantly reduce stress and produce positive physiological effects and a more positive emotional state. These findings could account for my positive feelings when walking around and taking photographs. This research suggests the presence of substantial vegetation in suburban areas, such as Reed, has positive health effects on the residents, supporting the principles that underpin the Garden City movement. Similar effects could be said to occur in other Canberra suburbs that were also designed with Garden City concept in mind, such as Ainsley, Barden, Forest and Yarralumla. Joy 2007 argues that architecturally speaking, pure urban environments consist principally of forms considerably less complex than what is seen in nature, and suggests these forms that cause negative feelings in people. Joy equates the more complex natural forms to fractal geometry and attributes these positive physiological effects to these fractal characteristics, compared to the underlying Euclidean geometry dominating urban environments. Urban Citadel. This photograph book features and explores the ongoing development of the Woden Town Centre in southern Canberra. This redevelopment features the construction of high-rise apartments and the refurbishment of old federal government offices for further high-rise accommodation. The town centre will also become the endpoint for the newly completed light rail running down a major road known as Adelaide Avenue. These new developments are part of the ACT Government's 2012 Infill strategy for greater housing densities to meet future population demands. In November 2015, the ACT Government issued a master plan for the redevelopment of the Woden Town Centre. This plan identified the need for medium and high density residential development as an endpoint for light rail projects running from the city and the demolition and reconstruction of the bus interchange. By November 2024, extensive redevelopment work has already been carried out. To date, 15 new high-rise residential buildings have been constructed, with another 2 old federal government offices refurbished for high-rise accommodation. This redevelopment now means that Woden will now have a significantly expanded 24 hours, 7 days a week residential population. Of note here is the building density has given little room for urban forestry, and the underlying Euclidean geometry of this environment dominates. As Joy suggests, this could have a negative health effect on the present and future Woden residents. Vegetation modification of local urban climate. As discussed in the urban green section, various studies have shown the beneficial health effects of vegetation on urban inhabitants. In climate change benefits, environmental data shows vegetation modification of local urban climate in 4 areas. Urban vegetation can perform ecological functions by removing several classes of air pollutants. Research has shown that urban forestry, especially trees, can contribute to a significant removal of particulate matter by acting as scavengers. MacDonald et al., by way of example, has claimed that increasing tree cover of the West Midlands to a theoretical maximum 54% by planting all available green space would reduce the average PMT concentrations by 26%. In noise pollution terms, Rettergam et al. Has shown urban forestry making noisy areas less noisy. Additionally, studies such as Freud et al. Have shown urban green areas can also modify the effects of stormwater runoff through retention, infiltration and evapotranspiration. Urban areas, being a mix of various hard areas composed of concrete and asphalt, can trigger an effect known as the urban heat island. This is an increase in temperature of several degrees more than in non-urban areas. This means that heat waves can be more severe in urban areas without significant green infrastructure. Gundawano states that urban forestry can modify these heat streams and offer more pleasant temperatures for these urban residents. As the Urban Citadel section shows, these benefits will be unavailable to the new residents of the Woden Town Centre. Canberra's urban design change. This section shows that through these examples how Canberra's urban design philosophy has changed. Fundamentally, the current ACT government's emphasis is to increase urban density through infill to meet projected population growth. However, in doing so, the green infrastructure has been minimised, which will have health and climate change consequences for residents in new developments such as the Woden Town Centre. Prior to 1988, before ACT self-government, the National Capital Development Commission (NCDC) emphasis was on landscape planning and design based on the original Griffin 1913 design for Canberra. The US architects Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Mahoney Griffin were the original designers of Canberra. They won a competition for the Australian capital launched by Minister for Home Affairs King O'Malley in May 1911. Taylor states Griffin incorporated the social reform ideals of the Garden City concept into residential suburban design and intended in his plan a residential grid pattern of tree-lined wide streets. The aim behind the Garden City movement, as Nabilia discusses, was to combine the benefits of the city, such as employment and better amenities, with the countryside to create healthy working and living conditions for urban residents. In the late 1950s, with political will present to develop Canberra, the National Capital Development Commission was established in 1958. Its stated aim was to plan, develop and construct the city of Canberra as the national capital of Australia, with the Griffin's original plan used as a guide, funded by the Commonwealth of Australia. NCDC planning emphasised the integration between urban open space and urban development. Taylor suggests that one of the landscape architect's tasks was to ensure that the spaces around and between buildings are designed to attract, refresh and excite, at the same time complementing the building. The NCDC planned and built 4 new town centres called Woden Western Creek, Belconnen, Tuggeranong and Gagarin to cope with the demands for rapid urban growth with accompanying extensive leaf suburbs and nature reserves. After the Australian Capital Territory was granted self-government in 1988, Sampson and Burras have strongly suggested this brought with it structural financial problems for the future development, as the same level of pre-1998 funding was unavailable. In the 1990s, following self-government, Fisher et al. States a market-driven approach to development and construction began to take hold so as to reduce capital costs. This approach emphasised increased density development and decreased individual block size, argued as more sustainable development. This reduction in block size was accompanied by a reduction in street and nature straight widths, but no reduction in house sizes. This reduction did not result in a diminution of houses, but rather a substantial elimination of the green spaces. The traditional Canberra pre-1998 bush streetscape, as seen exemplified by the urban green photobook, has given way, as Taylor suggests, to an unrelieved roof vista. An excellent example here is the new suburb of Whitlam, in which housing density gives very little allowance for urban forestry. As a lack of green infrastructure takes place on those residents that occupy Woden Town Centre, it is very possible that such residents will aspire to seek and live in those Canberra areas where there is significant urban forestry. This assertion is supported by Ziegler and Johnson et al.'s 2023 study on housing buyer preferences in urban areas shows that buyers prefer green over non-green areas. Their study further suggests that increasing the level of vegetation in common suburban outdoor places increases attractiveness and with it property sales. This inevitably could lead to increased demand and prices for those properties. Brown et al. Have suggested on a similar infill planning strategy for Perth, may result in attainment of urban infill's targets. It's likely to lead to a reduction in tree capping at higher temperatures and a decrease in the range of other benefits provided by trees. In the case of this redevelopment at Woden Town Centre, there appears to be a case as very little provision has been made for any green areas, let alone trees. This means that the current and future Woden Town Centre residents will not get any green infrastructure, health and climate change benefits, and will suffer the consequences for its lack. This could also be the case in other new urban Canberra areas where urban density is the main aim. Conclusions. Through comparing and contrasting, both photo books show how traditional landscape design has been sacrificed for urban density in recent Canberra urban development to meet projected population growth. However, in doing so, there will be health and climate change consequences. This talk comes from seeing two photo books detailing different eras of Canberra's development and show the change in urban design philosophy. When combined with other information, they demonstrate the utility of looking at an urban area by these means. In my view, these photo books provide basic visual accessible studies for more detailed future thematic urban studies of Canberra. These initial studies can also suggest areas for future research that were hidden. As an example, the Urban Green photo book showed an absence of any native plants in the 1920s heritage suburb of Reed, showing an indigenous landscape that has been overridden. This raises questions for future research on the nature of this heritage.